So I like to, by the way, after this intro, I'll put my webcam off. Um, but I like to start by really acknowledging the fact that we are living in very, very complex times with COVID-19. And I like to really, we never know who's on the phone, who's not, but I like to present my condolences to anybody who had lost somebody or lost a family member or neighbor or friends uh, during this COVID time. And I also like to show some support for people who are family members still going through it. And also, we know that some people have lost their jobs, and I think that it's very important to recognize that this is a difficult situation, and yeah, and that we are all with you as an industry. We have to support each other. We've seen stuff like this before, not in virus wise, but more like a crisis. And I really very hopeful that we'll get through the other side very quickly. I'd also like to actually thank Dr. Cameron Harris, who nominated me for this CIM lecture series. And I'd also like to thank the 10 signatures that he had to gather nationally. Dr. Cameron and I worked together years ago, starting at Accenture, where I've been talking about digital and technology for mining and metal sector. This presentation here is not, I always find it interesting that I call it a lecture. It sounds really bad in English. It's not really a lecture. It's more of a conversation based on projects I worked on directly, projects that other people worked on, and research in digital innovation overall. So I'm not pretending that this is the Bible. You've noticed that I talk a lot about different pathways to get to the success. And yeah, and I hope you'll like it. I tailored it down because typically it's in-person session, but I didn't want to basically have people not listening. So I got it down to, I think, about 17 slides of content. So I should go quickly. And yeah, please feel free to ask questions. Again, this is not pretentious, it's not even close. Like, I'm not pretending to know the answer, but I'm sharing things that I've seen and things that I've seen working. You'll also notice that I reference other papers, even some of our own competitors at EY, because this is not digital technology or digital transformation is not it's not a path that one firm or one research group owns all the answers to. If it was like that, we would not have so many technology companies today. So, like I said, I try to make the presentation funky a little bit. So I have, how did it change back to this? Can you guys still see the slides or no?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay. So there's basically three main content today. One, I'll talk about Industry 4.0, which is really the reason why I was selected to do this lecture. And then I'll talk about how digital transformation pairs into Industry 4.0. And then I'll talk about the imperatives for mining and metals. And the imperatives are a mix of research, but also first-hand experiences that I've had, and also discussion with other people that have experiences with it. And then on the road to digital, again, this is a plural. It's because there's different paths, and I'm just going to talk about different frameworks around it. Like Christine said, I think that after each section, I'll pause and see if there are questions. And please feel free to use the chat box to ask your questions, and Christine will be monitoring that. Any questions before I start? Okay, can keep going. So Let's start with digital world today, because mining is just a subsector or a sector of a larger economic power that drives the human race. So I will start by basically talking about Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is actually it's quite new of a concept. It started in 2011 by a group of German researchers and industrialists that basically wanted to figure out what was the future of our industries, and they try to use all the logic of scientific discoveries, but also the industrial application that we've seen in human history. So typically, the industry 1.0, well, there's like a pre-industry. Pre-industry is basically before 1700s. So industry 1.0 is really starts with the mechanization and the use of steam power and weaving loom and the first factories where they were used. And I believe that the most symbolic toy or discovery of Industry 1.0 is the steam engine that we saw in locomotives. Anybody of us that used to watch like cowboy movies, I've seen these steam engines. And then during Industry 2.0, we have the 4T and also the organization of labor for mass production. That era has also seen the use of electricity, not directly in our house yet, but really in massive industrial complex. Then those researchers, and by the way, although it came from Germany, today everybody's using it. Those researchers actually think that around the 70s, we started having some sort of Industry 3.0, where we had automation and computers and electronics that are becoming very, very important. By the way, I've tried to put some symbols on the side there, which are kind of symbolic of how people view it and think it's okay and normal. Some of us remember seeing all these processor pictures on laptops and computers when we were going to university. This is why I picked some of these. And then finally, the current industrial era, according to the researchers, and it's actually well accepted today, is that this is the cyber physical system, the Internet of Things, and the networks, the expansion of connectivity, and this is why they call it the connected world. And this is really what I'm going to talk about today. So if you think about Industry 4.0, it's really, you get digital networks between products and machines, machine talking to products and humans and vice versa. And the digital transformation is really how an organization uses all that connectivity, all that the power of physical and digital world to change its own horizontal and vertical value chain. And this is why it's pervasive to everything an enterprise does. This is an example of how fast things have been going. If you look at the time where, we all used to go and try to get a compact computer. Compact doesn't exist anymore, I guess. And then the wide internet, and in the beginning with the wide internet, we all remember, the dial-up and all these waiting times. And you compare that to today, where people are complaining about, internet speed, even if it's quite fast, but we change everything along the way. And today in the connected world, well, if you think about in your own house, the amount of devices that are talking to each other and they're drawing from your internet, it's fascinating. And those, and as we move forward, it's expected to be even more powerful, which is why we start hearing things like the 5G, so that connectivity is much better and the speed is different. On the right side, I put some symbols and words that anybody on this call, if you're not familiar with it, you should start getting familiar with them. They're very critical. So automation and robots. Automation and robots, it's somewhat complicated today to separate them because it may not be a physical, like sci-fi looking robot, but if you think about the Roomba that is doing your vacuum cleaning, it's somewhat of a robot, and it makes. And you can also think about robots as in process automation, and this is another robotization, cybersecurity, and so on. So when I worked for Dundee, I used to say that we need to really have some sort of additional education because not everybody is spending the time that some of us are spending trying to understand this. And part of the digital education is actually making people fully understand what these terminologies mean and what is it exactly and how it's going to impact their life. If you try to think about what has changed, so during Industry 4.0, there's major business models that actually happen. The first one on the left is really the advent of Nike into some sort of a wearables and fitness communities. It went from just selling apparels to doing that. And if you think about the second one is obviously Netflix that went from the DVD mailing to basically being in our houses and on our mobile devices everywhere. I gave an example of BMW because it's easy to get the example of Uber, who started from nowhere, but BMW also actually created a capturing services, although they're not in that business, and they were learning from the Ubers of this world. So sometime when you're changing the business model, there's somebody else can come behind you and copy and get better at it. And this is also what I'm trying to say. There's some sort of ecosystem of players that you create, and they're all interconnected, and they feed from each other in terms of discoveries and best ways to do things, or the technology. The other aspect of Industry 4.0 is really the value, the market sizes of them. I wanted to put things into perspective. So, for example, when you look at the bottom left of the screen, and you see 225 billion US for industrial IoT market by this year. The easiest way to compare it is to think about the budget of the province of Ontario. Ontario budget is about maybe 150 billion. So it's like running Ontario, but it's a sector, and this came really recently. IoT is very recent. It didn't come out of the blue. It's more of a progression of other technologies, but it's very recent. Healthcare. We've seen during COVID, there's been a lot of changes in terms of how we're talking to our GPs or general practitioners or family doctors, however people call it, and how suddenly we went from, oh, we gotta go and sit and wait, to having basically chat rooms with the doctors where you can talk about your symptoms and get basically some sort of assessment right away. I believe that this is actually going to change even faster because if you think about the wearables that we have that are tracking our heart rate and how we sleep and sometimes how we eat and what kind of exercises we do, soon enough, we are going to walk into a general practitioner office, or we're going to basically call them on Skype. And then we're going to, well, Skype actually is going to be retired. So we're going to call them on some sort of platform. And then we are actually going to dump the data for them to look at. It's not, I think it's going to be less and less of this walk into the office and get the nurse to take your blood pressure, because that's like a one-time data. It's going to be more of a, okay, here's the whole picture of this person. And you can see that, we as humans, our invisibility stops at health. And you can see that among all the investment, all the markets that we're going to see in the near future, healthcare is a big one. And so we can expect some changes there. The reason I talk about this is because, well, we're all mining practitioners on the phone, and we need to really think about how digital also will affect how better we get at health and safety, because the whole world is actually spending more time in that tool. I want to mention online groceries because COVID-19 made it very obvious that some grocery stores were better prepared than others, and that maybe after this we will not go back to the historical buying of groceries, and maybe the stores themselves would not actually want to do it because they will be better off shipping the groceries and not having to put air conditioning all over some places in the store, in addition to having the warehouse air conditioned. So there may be some changes in the way we live after COVID. So this picture, I used to show it. So I think I'm down to like maybe 6 or 7 CIM presentations so far since the summer. And I used to show this picture because there was within EY there's a group of economists that actually run this EY disruption index, and then I try to show which sector gets disrupted the most and how often. And they look at merger and acquisition, they look at new discoveries, they look at new business models, and also they also look at what I call the digital Darwinism, which is basically how many companies actually disappear because of digital transformation. And you can see mining in here would be part of construction and material. Is more of a global categorization. So mining goes into construction and material. And you can see that, we were in the middle, and this was like last year. And you can see that some sectors that are really being disrupted the most are travel and leisure, and also oil and gas. With COVID, we expect that this is going to completely change. So I can't wait to see the new disruption index this coming summer, because some of you have seen this on social media, I believe, where it asks the question of who led the digital transformation of the company, and then COVID was basically the answer. I try to put it like, after COVID, we'll have more than just COVID. We're going to get some leaders, and we're going to get other members of companies to participate. So why am I talking about this? Well, because we actually now know that it's very urgent to understand and adopt technologies. If you're like me and you have younger kids, and once Doc Ford decided that we were going to go with this 1 hour a day online education, you will realize that some of your kids' teachers were not really digitally savvy. There was a lot of hit and miss last week. It was pretty serious. And then the understanding of, okay, it should be Google Meet, Google Classroom. So this understanding and adopting the digital technology is going to be a big deal. Even in companies that were not prepared, going from some companies didn't even understand that Skype is slowly going to get basically obsolete. Microsoft is pushing with Teams. Some companies get surprised with Zoom. Zoom was seen as a great platform, easy to go on, but then there was the hacking that happened, and then people start getting nervous about it. So we need to understand it more and more. Some people also start realizing that, well, when we're working from our home, suddenly the company may want to know how we set up at home, because we don't want to have some sort of hack through your personal Wi-Fi from your house. So that's going to change, I believe. The second one is really the digital priorities. Suddenly we realized during COVID that some things we can't do if COVID was to repeat itself. We also realized that some aspects of digital we haven't paid attention to, and now we have to reprioritize. Accepting virtual work environment is going to be a big deal. It's not for everyone, that's for sure, but by the time we get to the other side of this crisis, would have demonstrated that at least some of the roles could really easily work well remotely. And while we're doing that, we actually reducing our global footprint, and then reducing time in transit, which is completely useless for the personal life of our employees. The other piece is really the digital supply chain. we've seen really quickly how we nearly ran out of toilet papers across the world, and how we couldn't really tell how far out we were. We also realized quickly that the supply chain is very global, and things are coming from weird places that we don't even think about. So suddenly we may want to know exactly how far is it, and there are some economists that are anticipating that we may break down the supply chain and reorganize ourselves to have some sort of a local production facilities for some of the immediate needs. I remember the French president actually said that they were going to change it in France. They're not going to rely on external supply chain. So that's going to be big with inventory management and things like that. And then establishing trust is another big thing, whether it's on blockchain or on cyber, because in the digital world, we always want to make sure that what we're getting is actually something we can trust. The information and the quality of the information. And finally, enterprises have realized during this crisis right now that the traditional risk management wasn't completely ready for something as disruptive as COVID-19. And if you like me and you watch the movie Pandemic, I mean, it's not a movie, it's a documentary, Pandemic on Netflix, you actually realize that, well, these bouts of virus outbreak happen more often than we think they happen, and they're just not global as often. And you need to rethink the way you set up your resilience for disruptions in your sector. I'm going to pause here a second before I get into imperatives in mining and metals to see if we have questions. Any question, Christine, or not yet on the chat?
No questions on the chat yet, but if anybody does have questions, feel free to just let us know you have a question and we'll unmute your mic.
Cool. Okay. So.
Oh, we've got one from Colin.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
From Colin. Actually, do you want to unmute? Or it's Patty. There you go.
Hi, Christine. Colin and I were chatting. I'm just closest to the keyboard.
Perfect.
On the, we're just encouraging questions too, but on the chart with the dots for the transformation, did the size of those dots mean anything? Like, was there two scales going on there?
Which slide is that one?
Go back. I think it was just the last one. The one with the different industry, that one. Did the size of those dots mean? Yeah.
Okay. Please repeat your question now.
Just the size of the dots and the disruption index. Are those just from 1 to 13 and the biggest ones at the top, or is there also something in the scale with the dots?
Oh yeah, I think the scale is the amount of disruption happening within the sector. Yeah.
Okay. I got it.
Okay.
Okay, we do have another question, Theo.
Yes. Yep.
When does the disruption index come out, and where is it available?
I'll check that for you guys. It's made by our Asia Pacific and Oceania teams, and it's a bunch of economists. Typically, most people don't ask for it, but it should come out next summer, and which is soon. So I'll get an update. I can get an updated one to you, Christine, then you can share with the members.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about the imperatives in mining and metals, and I like to say that there's many, and every company picks what is customized to their needs. the most important piece here is that a forester, which is they run surveys and they do a lot of research on different aspects of technology. They actually anticipate that the biggest engineering of companies since the inception of the PC will happen now. It's going to be the digital transformation. And if you look at the chart, it's actually across everything that we do. Whether or not you're talking about people, you're talking about finance and tax. Some of you heard about the digital tax, which is a complication that hasn't been solved yet. It was about to be solved and COVID happened. So we gotta wait a bit because it's mostly run by Europe. So it takes time. Risk and cyber is different. Technology itself is different. Things like cloud or application rationalization that we used to talk about, that we never talked about in the past, are now a big deal. Supply chain operations is a big thing, and the most important aspect of this forestry research was that 65% of the transformation will happen in operations, and in mining, it's very easy to see that kind of prediction. If we look at another research, this is coming from McKinsey Institute, they looked at where the value of digital transformation would be for mining companies. One CEO told me recently, after looking at this chart, that actually in his mind, if we do the transformation operation management, we will end up having the health and safety and productivity benefits as a consequence of better operation management. But you can see that, again, this is the mining sector, mining and metals. So not just digging the dirt, but also smelters and other metal producers. You can see that still it's an operation management. You can see that, there's questions around understanding the resource space. So what we're getting in and grades and concentrate quality, impurities. It's also about optimizing how the material is flowing. In mining and metals, we tend to have a lot of storage points, and which is not acceptable for other type of sectors. Now, in today's world, things could be different moving forward because just in time sometimes becomes a problem when you get major disruption. I don't expect this is a case of mining, but it can happen. Other aspect is really thinking about supply chain differently, doing purchasing analytics, paying attention to total cost of ownership, which we're not very good at historically, doing condition-based monitoring, which we're not good at historically. The real time on the operation management is also important. The reason is that, today let's say we're doing surveys, we can use drones to do the surveys, and we know there's lots of big major drone companies, whether it's underground or surface, that can give you the data as the drone is flying, and that's real time. We can also think about stuff like operation centers that actually can visualize what's going on and make decisions on the spot, which reduces the deviations to the plan. And, not that health and safety is the least, but health and safety is definitely some place where we have to continue doing better and removing people from harm's way. I'll talk more about human productivity for the next slide. If this is another research, I like you probably know about reading my bio. Although I do business, I'm at heart I'm a scientist. I like data and I like thinking through impacts and the ecosystem of impacts. So this is the World Economic Forum research on what is the value of digital transformation for the mining and metal sector. You can see the numbers are similar, 320 billion for over 10 years. McKinsey came at 350, not that different when you think in 10 years, and also different levels of adoption. Why I put this research up there is because they also look beyond just the money, just the value to the industry. There's a certain value to society. Digital transformation, some of the activities, and I'm sure you get that one shortly, will actually reduce the CO2 emission from our producing facilities, and it'll also reduce the number of injuries and save a bunch of lives. So imagine people with wearables at a mine site, and let's say somebody's having a ailment, and you can actually detect it because you're monitoring their wearables, and then you can react right away. It doesn't have to be a wearable. Sometimes it can be in the minus lamp, but you can react right away. It's real time, allows you to save lives. And all of us know that the world is not in good health overall, with like diabetes and heart attacks and things like that. So we need to be able to react right away for our workforce, and digital can save lives that way. Same thing with injuries, because maybe someplace we don't need to go. I always think about this drone company, Exim, that we work with in Bulgaria, and how the drone can go into areas that I don't have to send a surveyor into, and that reduces the risk because there's no human into abandoned area, and then you can get a clear picture before you actually do anything. That also can avoid injuries and save lives. This is a contentious topic. It's the job displacement or job losses. Sometimes I just want to call it what it is. It's job losses. Because some things are not going to be the same, so you need to move the people elsewhere, so that job is gone. The person is really who you're displacing. And it doesn't mean that you will lose all the jobs, but it means that there's going to be some retooling or reskilling that happens. But the same happened in the 80s when we went from all manual to using computers. So it's just again, like going from industry 3.0 to 4.0, or going from industry 1.0 to 2.0, there's always a shift in society in terms of what is the valuable job and which job needs to change because we figured out a different way to do it. In terms of the impact, you can see in green, I hope everybody has the same colors. Basically, we have the business impact, that's the first bar. And then the second bar, which is a green on my screen, is the societal impact. And if you think about the connected worker is anything to do with the workforce, whether or not you're giving them AR, whether or not you're giving them mobile devices, whether or not you're tooling them with I don't know, maybe they're working with bots, maybe working with process automating systems, or they're carrying wearables. You can see that the connected worker has a major business impact, positively, I mean. And you can also see that remote operation centers where people are not right at the face or right in the heat of the action, you also have a business impact. By integrating the platform, you get a societal impact. I mean, we can, digital is not just about the production. You can also think about communities and how communities get information. We've seen what happened in South America with the dams. Imagine if the community had some sort of a digitally enabled alarm system that actually gets into the Instagrams or into the Facebook, and then it gets people to react differently. These are the realm of the possible for us to actually get better in the sector. So I try to simplify these big ideas into simple items. And the idea, well, my goal is not to say that, oh, you got to do these items one by one, and then you're going to get to this value. The goal is just to give examples of areas or initiatives that you can drive to address certain aspects. Yeah, the most important piece is really cybersecurity. I keep forgetting about that. In the digital world where we are operating in the cyberspace, if you don't have cybersecurity, there's a major problem. And I still don't believe that the mining sector has embraced it as much as others. And there are other sectors that are still getting breached. And sometimes I just shake my head because I don't understand why a bank would not have a cybersecurity in place when there's money flowing and there's people accessing banking accounts from everywhere. So cybersecurity is critical. The second one is the connected people. And the connected people, I already talked about the digital education, mobile devices, wearables, augmented reality and assisted reality. I've seen a lot of technology out there for what Microsoft called mixed realities, which goes from augmented reality to virtual reality. They've got assisted reality. It is showing more and more that actually the worker is not going to disappear in the digital world when we go fully digital. The work is actually getting help to make the decision because the robots cannot make decisions when the rules are not routine. And most of the time, as humans, although we routine people, we routine beings, we rarely make something so routine that it can be done by a robot. So the humans are going to be enhanced by using augmented and assisted reality. Decision support is another one. The reason why we are the ones that are running the show as humans because we are the one making the decision, and decision there's a lot of tangible and intangible factors. So we need to get enough information of all sorts for the decision to be actually sound and with the best assurance possible. So decision support is things like advanced analytics, machine learning, deep machine learning. I watched a supplier do a presentation today about how you can use video analytics, and they basically using low resolution so that they don't need to see the people's faces, and that way they don't have any of the privacy problems. But they use it to actually anticipate how we're gonna go back to work. And that video analytics is actually going live and figure out the social distancing or how people are sitting in the cafeteria or how they're working. And then it actually highlights things for the manager to take action. It's also basically clocking people washing their hands and making sure they do the 20-second washing of your hands. So there's a lot of capabilities that are machine vision that could actually help people make decisions that can save lives. Robotics and automation, smart centers gonna continue to grow, hardware upgrades, having system robotics, autonomous operations, and so forth. Robotic process automation, in case some people don't know what it is, it's basically taking the tasks that people are doing and then taking all the routine and basically the tasks that nobody wants to do or people are not happy doing, and having a bot execute those as long as they're routine. And there are rules that the bots are following, and if it's out of the rules, then it goes to a human who makes the call. There's a lot of that everywhere today, so it's something that's actually going to become more and more important because we also need people to enjoy their work. So we need to take out anything that is mundane and routine and doesn't add value to the job. Integrated system is critical. It's where IT plays a big role. Historically, I had a slide on how important IT is in the digital transformation. In the sector in general, we don't pay enough attention to IT, but IT is very critical. The way I compare IT value in the digital transformation is how I compare having the best cell phone or smartphone you can have, but you are somewhere in northern BC or northern Saskatchewan where there's no network. So you have something nice, but it's useless. IT is where you start thinking about infrastructure, network, making sure the speed is correct, making sure you have some sort of governance around the data, that you can trust the data, figure out how you can get people to have applications that are growing faster and decommissioning faster too. Like most of us don't even pay attention, but I remember when it was harder to delete an app compared to today where you can install it and just click it and exit out. So these are things where integrated system and IT people in general are going to be very critical. Before I go into becoming digital in practice, I would like to pause and ask a question again, if there's any question.
Anybody have any questions? Feel free to just even type it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay, I'll keep going for now. Right, Christine?
Yeah, no questions as of now, so continue. Thanks, Theo.
Okay. So this section here is usually where I get a lot of questions. again, I'm going to talk about experiences that I've had. You know, whether I worked at Accenture and helped some clients, or EY where I helped clients, or when I actually was in the industry at Dundee doing some of the digital in practice. Again, it is not, it's just one recipe of making omelets. So there's different recipes, and people may want it spicier, less spicy, whatever you want. So it's not really, but it is what I've seen and what I've tested, and what others also have seen and tested. You can see that it's not just me, it's a combination of expertise on digital transformation, and it's not just mining. Okay, so most of the time, organizations are really stuck with where to start, and I've seen it many times where people actually not start because they wouldn't know how to start. There's a lot of consultants that will come up with like, oh, they do wave one, wave two. There's a lot of ideas around, oh yeah, maybe you do a strategy first, then you put a team in place, and then you execute your project. There's different ways to get to start. But the most important thing for me is that they need to start. The more you wait, the more you'll be behind. You may wait for the new technology, but you'll be behind in terms of how your people, your workforce, is upskilled and ready to accept digital. Some of the questions we've seen is like, you know, is really digital strategy about the human more than digital? Should I build it? Should I buy it? Is that a plug and play, or is it something where I build a team to do it? And these are like big questions that I've seen. If you build AI and then you end up having bots, is it a workforce, and how do you manage it? What happened when your own people actually started fighting because you have different visions of where it should go? What happened when you actually have people that can adjust quickly enough to your strategy, so you're way too ahead? How are the regulators going to help you achieve the vision? Like, is it a shred tax credit? And also, if you start deploying something, will you have a problem with digital tax? Especially in Sudbury, we have a lot of incubators and innovators that do a lot of solutions. And the other thing is, how do you keep the doors open? How do you continue progressing with digital? How do you leverage ecosystems? People already created something, but you may not know them today, but they have created it. And how do you use the data to actually get to the another level? Like, how do you, for example, use the data and become a different type of company to change your business model? So these are questions that will always happen, and they may not have a clear answer. They may have a temporary answer, but at least it gets you to start somewhere. So in order to start somewhere, one of the frameworks that I've seen work is really thinking in terms of now, next, and beyond. And on this slide, I try to make it COVID relevant. So now, next, and beyond is really about making sure that what your actions are doing today are tied into a bigger purpose that you're not going to change, or that when you change later on, it's still the same purpose. It may be different ingredients and different solutions, but same purpose. So in terms of now, if I were a mining company, it's really redefining your agenda by addressing issues and challenges that you're witnessing right now. Questions about, you know, should you have had the mill on what they call it a lights out environment? A lights out environment is basically a place where machines are running and you don't even need to put the lights on, because there's no human in there, because machines don't need to see anything. And the question is, would you have done that if you had a choice before COVID? And if you did it, how would it change today? Like, could you not be feeding the mill today? with one loader operator if the mill is all like a box of lights out mill. Or it's harder to do that in smelters, but I know some part of the smelters can still do that. And do you believe that the current, by the way, this is the new expression. It's like IG for Instagram now. It's WFH, sorry, and it's working from home. Is the current working from home model safer for you? Is it? Do you have the platform for people to work from home? Are you able to pivot if people decide not to come back and work in the office 5 days a week? Are you able to pivot and still keep the same talent pool? And how are you going to do that? So check your platforms, make sure you're ready. Especially right now, there's a lot of available resources to help you change your platform and get up to speed with this. And there'll be some questions around now. It's like, are you going to slowly subsidize the internet bill of your employees? That could be a new thing. Same way we subsidize sometimes, or we help employees with transit. Like, is it going to be the new thing? I don't know. But this is important. Oh, are you going to subsidize the electricity? And I've noticed Ford yesterday said that he wasn't aware of why the energy board the OEB was trying to say that from May 7, they're going to put the prices back to what it used to be. But these are kind of questions that are new because people are staying home. And then the most important, well, one of the critical thing is like if you really want to get on digital transformation, and I hope you do, is really think about your organizational maturity and your readiness. And you can do that through like a lot of online and remote tools. You don't really need to sit. People love workshops and sitting in a room together, but the virtual have showed us that it's not really necessary. You can have a bunch of people across the world get in Teams or GoToMeeting like today or Zoom or whatever, and then get to a solution. And this is the time to do it when people can actually think through things and they're not tied in day in, day out in the office. Next is how you think about next is really how you execute once we get out of COVID. And it's like the things you do now should help you define your digital transformation strategy, and also I'll talk about engine room later. Also help you figure out how you're going to govern the changes that you're going to create. You can also think about in the next, you're going to think about how you're going to prioritize your delivery so that you start getting results right away and get the enterprise-wide engagement, so on and so forth. And the beyond is really talking to the purpose of your company. So let's say you are a widget making company for the mining sector in Sudbury. Is your goal to become a very flexible widget making company, like the ones we've seen recently, which were able to flip around and start making ventilators? And if you're able to do that flexibility, what else can you be making? And these are some of the things that COVID has showed us, that in terms of digital transformation, you could be set up to pivot quickly and do other things. The other one that is critical is that digital transformation is a culture thing. We tend to compare the startup world environment and culture to the heavy industry culture and make fun of each other. That's what we always do. Yet the culture in digital may actually become the culture that is acceptable in enterprises. So how are you getting prepared for that? And also, how are you getting your ecosystem of suppliers and clients to help you change as you go into a very innovative environment? So that's one way to look at your prioritization from now to beyond. Now, when you're going through the motions of defining how you're going to tackle digital transformation, there is a very important introspection aspect of it. People need to really understand where they sit today in terms of maturity on the digital scale. And like I said at the beginning, all the list of these new words for the digital world that I put on the slide, where you have bubbles, and then you have the 50 billion devices. If you run a survey in your organization and people don't know about half of these terminology, your maturity may not be that great. And you have a great maturity, but you haven't been communicating to everybody in your workforce. And then the advanced maturity is definitely the ones that the Google, the Amazon. And by the way, I put just some there. If I forgot somebody, it is not a selection. It's just mainstream names that I can think of. And then your digital ambitions could be on the y-axis. And what I put in red for digital Darwinism was like, if your maturity is low and your ambition is low, you're most likely not going to make it, probably by 2030, because it's going to be hard to really compete and stay relevant. And it's just not how the world is working today. So you'll be a candidate. You may still make it. This is why I said potential, but you'll be a candidate of digital Darwinism. And we have seen a lot of them. I can name them forever, but we have seen a lot of them disappear. If you have
Theo, can I interrupt? We do have a question.
Yeah.
Which mining companies would you place in the green rectangle?
So these are the questions I'm not allowed to answer officially because I speak as a EY partner. I think it's better for everybody to do their own introspection about this. But let's just ask ourselves, which mining company is as big as Amazon?
Or any mining companies in that quadrant?
Yeah. And maybe in the lower end, maybe there's somebody in the middle. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of ambitious companies that are in that yellow left quadrant. But I think if we go by market cap, I think the largest mining company doesn't even compare to any of these. If we go by,
so where would they be plotted on your graph?
I'll be tempted to say that, in my humble opinion, the mining companies are most likely gonna be in the red or in the yellow of the left quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other quadrant of advanced maturity but low ambition tends to be startups that basically want to do much more than what they're doing. So they think their ambition is not high enough, but if you compare them to another one, they could actually be like, whoa, man, you guys are way over the moon. Or they into something else, like if I think about companies that want to do self-driving cars, they may be saying, well, we don't have a big ambition, but it was like, wow, your ambitions are actually going to change it. Or companies that are just lucky. That luck does exist. They may have inherited an IP and they don't have a big ambition, yet they're quite advanced. But it's less likely.
Okay. And any investment ratio, we've got a cost per ton of ore to digital transformations for underground or open pit mines.
In the past, the open pit mines were viewed as being ahead because of the GPS. The democratization of GPS, where you can actually start locating items, was also where the OEM invested a lot for those autonomous trucks. It was easier to have a fiber communication line set up. The Australians, because they embrace innovation early, they spent a lot of money going digital. So open pit, because of all of that, ended up being, wow, this is like the best place where things are happening. I was lucky enough to work for Noranda and Falconbridge when the technology center was still running. And I can say that back in the 2000s, there were some really impressive discoveries and practices in underground. And then it kind of went away, and I see it coming back. So for Canadian mining companies, unfortunately, we're mostly underground, and but there are more and more solutions for underground. If you want to think about underground, aside from the fact that some of our undergrounds is very old tunnels that are going all over the place, if you're building underground from scratch like some companies do in the prairies, you can actually have proper tunnels and then use tunnel technology, which we have tunnels like everywhere, like civil. And then you can use tunnel technology to actually accelerate your digital. But I would say, yes, typically open pit has looked like it had it easier, but it doesn't mean that underground can't really do it, especially today on this side of the planet. We are mostly going to have underground mines than open pit mines. So we might as well start getting ahead with it and moving forward. And most of them are deeper and deeper.
And another question, are you seeing any geographic trends?
Like I mentioned, Australia has invested a lot into innovation. They didn't really call it digital, but they invested a lot into innovation. We have less, some of the concepts that I talk to clients about in Canada, we have less ambitions, or maybe not ambition, willingness to embrace and try them. The large companies like we have in Sudbury tend to have more levers to do them. So I found the large companies that are multinationals tend to do them more easily than the junior companies. So, and we have a lot of junior intermediate gold producers. So that's what I've seen. In the US, I haven't seen anything in particular, aside from the Canadian producers in the US, which is the same. Mm-hmm. And in South America, the Brazilian ore producer is big on digital. They invested a lot. They're probably the largest in South America. The copper producers in South America, not that much yet, but I've seen many started. What is interesting, I find, is that it's the commitment to the digital transformation. And once people are committed, they can go faster than the people that started before them. And they can leverage quicker. So it's how you commit, how you set up your structure to deliver, and how you work with your ecosystem.
Okay, we do have a few more questions. One is, what do you think are the biggest impediments for companies who want to get from the red quadrant up to the green quadrant?
So I have seen leadership changes that will push a company in the red to go into the green or go towards the green. Don't get me wrong; it's not, maybe I could have made like a 2x5 or 5x5, and then we can see incrementally somebody going to the middle or lower quarter or whatever, quartile or whatever. But I just made this to be simple. So I think that companies that have low maturity and low ambition will want to change ambitions, or once they have a different purpose, they can suddenly accelerate. Think about, I'm going to get out of mining a little bit because it's easy to take the examples out of mining because I don't have a limitation of talking about those other examples. So think about how BMW ended up going with cap sharing, although it wasn't their idea. And how suddenly, if you fast forward, like this was 2011. Today, it's 2020. They are probably learn faster, and they're somewhere today where they can actually scale it up. So, yet they were just the traditional car maker. Think about Tesla, how it started, and there was nothing before, and then it had a different ambition, and it moved forward. I find that the companies that have a leadership that wants to make the changes, they will usually surround themselves with the teams and the service providers to help them make the changes. So to me, that's usually where it starts. Like, do you really want to do this? and do you want help to get it? That's what I find. But I don't think there's purposely companies that will sit in the red and just want to stay in the red. I think it's harder to do that. I think sometimes people in the red just don't know where to start, and they get scared to start, and they don't get the help.
Okay, we'll take one more question for before we move on. So, are there any other heavy industries like oil, gas, or power that do better in the green quadrant compared to mining? Do you feel?
Yeah. In our practice, what I've noticed is that the power and utilities tend to embrace digital. I don't really see if they have a burning platform to do it, but I think because they're dealing with a mass market of consumers, they typically do it. So I don't know, most of you on the phone probably remember when we started talking about the smart meters years ago, and how some consumers hated it and didn't want to let the power utility people install them in their houses. It ended up being actually something major, right? Because today they can actually follow your heating system down and up if you want to. And today, I'm actually one of the people that inherited those smart meters and the thermostat. And I ended up changing the thermostat because I ended up realizing that the power utility company that gave me the thermostat wasn't the best thermostat because it wasn't Android native. So I did change it. But power utilities, because of the interaction with the consumers, tend to want to be basically compared to the banking sector or to the telco sector, and providing top-notch services to the consumers. That's where I see it the most. I think there was a lot of innovation in oil and gas. I don't think oil and gas is really pushing that far into digital. I think they're using a lot of innovation and technology, but less digital. So I would say power and utilities definitely.
Okay, we did have a few more questions pop up, so we'll go through those.
Okay.
What are the areas in the mining industry you feel are more engaged to change digitally? Would it be the maintenance or mine planning, production, financial departments?
So in my experience, I find that it depends on the company. I typically say that the maintenance planning department tends to like digital because it makes their life easier, and they actually have a comparison point. They can just say, how come my car is doing that and we can't do that at the mine? And then they can basically trigger the transformation. Finance tends to be smaller departments and tends to be harder for them to do this digital transformation side, but I can see them doing it, especially if they I want to call it like the first adopters of ERP systems, and they want to really understand how the mine is producing, and they want to connect directly to IoT devices or any PLC from far. HR, the new generation of HR leaders like digital because they do understand that the worker of today and into the future cannot stand obsolete paper trails and things like that. So I've recently seen a lot of HR leaders make business cases for HR information systems and payroll, and also talent hiring and retention. Because today, if you're hiring somebody, let's say you're hiring, I don't know, a student. Let's say you're hiring a student and they go through your traditional mining process compared to the same student trying to get into like banking. All the consulting firms, it could be night and day, and they may not want to work for the obsolete HR environment. So HR has a pressure because HR deals with people, just like P&U deals with consumers. So it's where you can get the feedback right away that people are not happy. But yeah, that's typically where I see it. Engineering tends to be really still into the science and innovation longer term. And there are some companies where the mandate and the mission of the engineering department is actually go and push for more of all the digital transformation. And those companies, yeah, is where you can see a mining engineer actually looking for digital solutions that are beyond the traditional engineering.
Okay, and are there any other examples of mining companies cooperating on digital transformation?
Cooperating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the industry associations. Dundee Precious Metals tends to allow a lot of competing clients to go visit the Chelopech mine in Bulgaria. And I've seen many of large mining companies go to Chelopech because there's a lot of hands-on practical examples of digital transformation. But I think most mining companies either interact through personal contacts. So somebody will call and ask, hey, how you guys did this? And then they try it themselves. I also seen the industry association, the bodies around governance of data, the bodies on CIMIC with innovation, and the CIM like this right now. But I don't really know of two mining companies working together on digital transformation where one will say, okay, we're going to test this one, you're going to test this one, and we're going to compare and then adopt. I've not seen that yet. They may exist, but I'm just not aware.
And Andrew just posted the website for the Global Mining Guidelines Group. So there'll be some information there as well. So we do have another.
This is where I know there's a very overt collaboration on digital transformation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we do have another question here. In the COVID-19 times, companies and governments will shift their focus from global to local, striving for self-sufficient economies, national logistic chains, and keeping their citizens busy and employed. This constitutes a strong argument against replacing people with bots. What's EY's opinion on that?
I'm not sure if I will convey EY's opinion. We're a bunch of firms. Mm-hmm. I personally believe that the bots are not really replacing the humans. The bots are replacing some humans that are doing tasks that those humans may not even enjoy. But right now, as we speak, there are bots that are operating in the background to make sure this is seamless. And the reason is that bots don't sleep at night, and bots are programmed to operate in milliseconds. So I don't, whether there's COVID or not, actually COVID is probably one of the reasons why this is going to accelerate. If you think about all these maps and data websites that are updating the information about COVID numbers, I'll be really surprised if these are all human input. I would say that there's a human oversight and monitoring before data goes live, but I don't think this is done by somebody sitting down and calling people or getting emails and copying. I don't think that's happening. So I never seen digital transformation as something that will destroy jobs. I see it as something that will actually make some jobs obsolete, but no different than when we went from coal mines to Industry 2.0. When we went to coal mines in the UK to Industry 2.0, where we started having these massive plants, lots of new people got hired, but the people that used to work in the coal mines that did not upskill probably didn't get hired. So it's a matter of thinking about the progress of the human race in the light of industrial eras. I don't really think it's just like an end of something, or that, oh, now the human is obsolete. Any IoT that I worked on, any drone, anything that looks like it's not run by a human, if you look at it, there's always a human oversight. It's just like it's a different skill set. That's really what I believe. But it's not an EY position. Good.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. We'll continue on with the presentation. We do have another question, but we'll save that one for the end.
Okay. Here is so in this one here, I want to talk about a different way to look at defining and implementing digital transformation. And if you look at it, I call it the Wheel of Fortune because I used to watch that show a lot when I was in university. So the first piece is really around thinking about your purpose and strategy. And this is what I call the engine room. It's actually how you study. You think about, okay, what's the purpose of strategy? And then you have to orchestrate the execution of it through a bunch of initiatives. Because at the end, digital transformation has to be in practice a bunch of initiatives that somebody or a group of people have to manage profitably or with really big value add to make the changes. And the other one is coordinating and accelerating initiative. This is what we call the unblock, because there's going to be different sorts of constraints, and you need to go through them and basically unlock them. So that is basically the digital transformation and technology and digital strategy and transformation engine room. So it's like the center. And then once you have the engine room running, you then need to start thinking about how I'm going to produce these ideas. So to produce them, you need to think like innovation lab. We have a lot of them in Kitchener-Waterloo. It's actually a great place to go take a tour if you ever want to start a digital transformation and you want to get ideas from outside mining altogether. So the innovation labs, they operate a certain way, and you can watch how they do it and copy it for yourself. Actually, some of them allow you to do sharing. So you will give them a project inside your company, and then they will take some of your people and have them spend some time with them day in, day out, and learn how they operate, which is always a good strategy for basically culture cross-pollination. The third one is really, now that you have created these ideas, how are you going to test them and fail multiple times and retest it and prototype it and all the very familiar cycle of iteration and failure. And so that is, if you look at the wheel, that takes a lot of time. It's probably the most difficult part of the digital transformation exercise. And then once you pilot it and you test it and people are happy and you clean it up, it's never completely perfect. This is why, it's like, it's really the most valuable product you can get. And then you just start deploying it. And once you start deploying it, as long as it doesn't have a lot of kinks, like for example, cyber protection, you don't want to deploy something that is actually not cyber ready, because that's a mistake. But once you get it done, then you can deploy it and start thinking about the value and keep investing to basically make the product better or the solution better. If you think about it, imagine that Apple had the first smartphone, and I'm not an Apple guy, so I don't remember what it was called. And that Steve Jobs said, no, I want this smartphone to be doing Instagram or some sort of Instagram, and he waited. by now I would have lost. And I've heard that there's a story where Microsoft actually created a smartphone, but they were late in the game. So sometimes when you have the MVP, you can actually, or MVS for solution, you can actually start as long as it's crystal enough, and then you can collect feedback and make it better as you go. And today, the smartphone, who back in the day, we used to just use it for simpler stuff, is much more complex, and it actually got better because there's an ecosystem of technologies and solutions that also progress for it to progress in it, which is where it is today. So behind all of these, there's definitely like sub elements and sub layers of all sorts of activities that you need to do to make sure that you get the transformation right. This deck is actually available to anybody attending the call, and I'm sure Christine will be able to send it to all of you later. But if you have more questions around the details, because there are details, it's a full portfolio management, it's a full ideation to deployment. And so that's the Wheel of Fortune. And I'd like to talk about the boosters, and I think it's like a slide and then we're done. So just bear with me a second. The boosters are elements that actually, once you have your digital strategy and your transformation in mind, and then you have your team, well, actually before you have your teams, and then you want to implement it, boosters make sure that you can get there faster and that you reduce the failure points. So for example, if I pick organization and process, did you put people in your digital transformation execution team that actually are already swamped with work? And then they're never going to have time to actually do it. They're doing it as a part-time. Well, if they're doing it as part-time, then it's not a priority. Then you're sending the wrong message to the whole workforce that, oh yeah, this is just a science project on the side. If you want to do digital innovation and digital transformation, you forget about the innovation ecosystem, it's also a mistake. You may still get there, but by the time you get there, it may look different because you haven't thought of every other supplier or ecosystem player that is also doing a lot of innovation. So you need to make sure you're picking it up as you go. I always, when I worked in industry, I always made sure there was like governance meetings with key vendors and key suppliers to hear about what they do elsewhere, to hear about where they're investing their own money, so that they can understand what to anticipate rather than wait and be surprised by a change where I already took the path a different way. Capture talent, never talk enough about that. And also enterprise scale, that's very important, especially in mining where we can have a great idea that comes out of one mine site or comes out of one department. For example, we tested digital signatures. This was like, it looks simple. It's a plug and play. One department decided to try it, and it was HR. And this ended up being one of the biggest changes we've done, reducing papers and not having to print and having people not having to come to the office. It was a major change to just have digital signatures. And then we also were able to like categorize the document and save it on cloud and not even worry about it. It was major. So if you have one department doing it and you don't scale it to the rest, then you run into issues where, okay, yeah, HR is doing it, but legal is not doing it. So when it gets to legal, they print it out and sign it on the paper, and then you lost the chain. And this is how you can actually think about boosting your digital transformation. This is a question that people have asked me all the time, and you actually did your research on this. So this is the summary of it. I'm not going to go through every one of them. I'm going to just take 2 and 5. And these are the pitfalls that I've seen, and actually not just many people have seen across all industries on digital transformation. And the number 2 is the lack of digital education, where you have executives or mindset operators, and you're talking to them about cloud, and you never explain cloud. So they have no idea what you're talking about, especially if they don't do that at home. So digital education and understanding of how value is created is very critical, because then everybody's talking the same language. I talked about this in the previous slide, but I want to insist again, if you neglect the importance of IT and the infrastructure and how the system runs, you can be really surprised. The digital transformation won't really happen. It's I wish there was some other way to say this, but there isn't. IT has changed and is not the guys that fix your computer anymore. It's not the guys that come and reboot it. It's much more complicated. It's much more complex. And you can think about IT in your own house. Think about Rogers or Bell and how they a Googleness, but oh, well, my phone is iPhone and works better with a different provider. This is how I've seen many companies do things sometimes. Somebody will go buy something and not think about how it's going to fit into their IT environment, and then suddenly it doesn't fit. That's the easiest example I can come up with. Oh, okay, Amazon Alexa 2 years ago. I bought Amazon Alexa 2 years ago. My kids go to school in French. Alexa didn't speak French. That was one of what I call an IT failure. Now it does, which is good, but it didn't. That's an IT failure. Oh, you go and you buy, I don't know, buy a TV, you plug it, but everything in your house is from a different application structure, and then suddenly your phone doesn't talk to it, and now you need to go find the remote all the time when you can use your phone. This is why IT is important. Understanding IT, having IT participate. Digital transformation is not IT. It's bigger than IT, but it requires IT. And this is my last slide. Usually this is where people want to go, which is why I put it last. It's what are the other initiatives that I have seen or we have seen as a firm across the mining sector. You can see it's by ease of implementation. Ease of implementation actually, again, depends on your organization maturity and your ambitions. And then you have the business value between high and low. Again, it depends because the companies are not the same. For some companies, going paperless is high value if they're using a lot of paper. For some companies, just moving from on-prem to cloud. For some companies, they want to stay on-prem, but they want to change, I don't know, the way they use mobile devices on-site. So it depends. But I just highlighted here some of the big ones where we know that the value was quite substantial. And this is just, again, it's an example. It doesn't apply to everybody, but it gives you an example of what is the realm of possible. And that was my presentation. I hope it didn't take too long.
Thank you, Theo. That was perfect. So I'll start off by asking the last question that somebody has posted here. Okay. Have you seen digital transformation applied to contracted service management in mining? For example, contracted services for maintenance or contracted auxiliary mining services?
I've seen pilots of blockchain for mining. This was done last summer, so I don't know with COVID if the client's gonna move forward with it, but it was because blockchain doesn't really need everybody to build a blockchain. Actually, there's better application where you can even have the contractor can be using Excel, and then the company, or vice versa, by the way. Sometimes the contractor is more sophisticated than the client. And one of them is using ERP, and then the blockchain just makes sure the contract is going together. As long as the invoices and proof of completions are something that you can upload, it can be done. So I know of a company that was doing a pilot. I think that it should be the new thing once we all get there. But this is definitely an area where you reduce the time of getting your value, because number one, if you're contracted and you do the service and upload it through blockchain, especially if you're using paperless, I get that information right away, and which allows my planners to continue planning and basically take some of the equipment or take some of the whatever it is devices and reallocate the resources because it's near real time. And at the same time, if I'm doing that, there's no reason why if you're the contractor, you wouldn't be able to figure out when I got the information and have the client's bank account pay you right then. This is another way to do it. If you think about this kind of, there's an indirect way of contracting this way, which we use all the time, is when we take a picture of the check and then we get the money right away. This is some sort of blockchain technology being used by the bank. So you could actually do that. Does it answer that question? I'll put my camera back on.
Does anybody have any other questions? I know I see a lot of comments coming through, how insightful the presentation was, and everybody's very appreciative. So is there any more questions coming in? Okay, so we've got another one here. So looking at the actual unemployment rates, don't think that repetitive jobs, example, warehousing, Amazon, Walmart, will be automated anytime soon. Besides, any major CapEx is being put on hold. How to justify investment in mining 4.0 in times of crisis and uncertainty. And then looking at the actual employment, okay, so that's just a copy and paste. So how do we justify any investment in mining 4.0 in times of crisis and uncertainty?
So far, what talking to clients across the world, what we've seen is that productivity and cost reduction are still going to be big on the agenda. And not long ago, when we had the commodities crisis, we cut a lot of costs out. And the new costs we're going to cut out may require that we think about digital. Again, I don't see digital as something that stops employment. I actually think digital is something that may create employment, depending on how skilled the people are. If you create okay, let me give you an example. I was talking to our counterparts in the US yesterday, actually, no, this morning. And they were talking about how call centers were going to close because they can run call centers with people calling from their houses. So it looks like a lot of employment first because call centers do have a lot of people. However, it's just a shift of the call center to some sort of a gig economy, the same way you have the Instacart guy that goes and gets the food for you from Loblaws or Walmart. So I don't see, I see more of shifts in society. I think that the employment rates are basically going to be big for governments, and they're going to have clear direction of how they want the numbers to be because it drives the whole economy. I think organization may think of it differently, and they may shift where the employment is. I tried the curbside pickup, I think 4 times now, where you order online and go pick it up. So I tried it at Home Depot and I tried it at Staples, and I actually have a sense that right now inside these 2 places, there's more people working than when I used to go there and there was nobody to answer the questions. I don't know if you guys seen that, but I remember those times. So I see more people working. I see a change. These jobs are different. But this again, the digital economy doesn't mean that you changing, you basically getting people out. You're just changing how the jobs are. and during COVID, I've seen both. But you can think the same for banking. They already were reducing the number of people in the branches anyway. But today's world, I actually have no idea how the banks are actually dealing with COVID. I didn't call any of the banks. But this is how I look at it. And I think the governments are going to say, okay, people need to be employed, because if people are not employed, we don't consume. It's just simple. It's very important to have employment. And the organization is going to think, okay, where is that employment? The localization is something we've seen in Australia. I don't know if you guys are aware of it, but during COVID, Western Australia decided that cross-border travel was prohibited. And if you did a cross-border travel, cross-border being between Australian states, not from abroad. So if you did a cross-border, then you had to go for quarantine for 14 days before you actually get into the public. This created a big problem for the iron ore producers, because although they are in northern Western Australia, most of the employment is coming from Southeast Australia. So what they ended up doing is they ended up helping the employees move to Western Australia so that they don't have this quarantine issue, and then helping them find jobs. So suddenly, everywhere else where real estate is lower in Western Australia, it's actually picking up, because there's suddenly hundreds of people that need to have a job, and they're moving with their families. So that's what I see on the localization. And again, it's a shift in employment, not really that all these people are going to lose employment. It's just going to change what kind of job they're working on. I don't know if that answers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So another question came in. What change management strategies can a mining company implement to sell digital transformation to its employees?
There's a great article on LinkedIn, and Christine, when I find out, I'll send it to you. Somebody in the US was talking about the 3 types of employees that we don't pay attention to in digital transformation, and they're not necessarily the naysayers. They're more like the subtle naysayers that actually end up not doing it and end up killing a digital transformation. I think that it's very important to have change management as a function, whether or not you outsource it. And I know in Sudbury, you guys have companies that do that, or you have to have it in-house. Gone are the days where people felt that, like a famous guy used to tell me, they felt that if they didn't need change management, they just changed the management. That doesn't work anymore. Digital transformation is a completely different beast. I've seen it with our site in Namibia, where we had RPA bot ready to deploy, but we needed to spend time with the employee to explain to them that this was going to allow them to actually get to do more functions, because the RPA was going to take some of the mundane work and then allow them to do more into finance and other things. So to me, change management is a profession. It's not something that any HR person does. Typically, mining companies just ask HR to do change management. It's a profession, and for digital transformation, it's even more specialized. So companies should think about how they will leverage that. If they want to create it, they can do that. This is where you have the buy or build, or they can just go with companies that have experience in it and start asking questions about, okay, how do we do that? How do we engage people? At Dundee, what I have done was to actually have external parties do most of the convincing and convey what the solutions are. And also we used to create a digital lunch and learn, where we just take employees through certain digital solutions like blockchain or cloud or RPA. And then in a non-threatening environment, have people ask all sorts of questions so that they can decide on whether or not they think that this is something they want to adopt. And it was always surprising who ends up saying that I want to adopt this. And once they want to adopt it, you actually halfway through
the transition.